All right, so JB, we have a Buick. I know that much. I'm not an expert, but I do know this is a Buick. Tell me what exactly this is and what's going on with it.
In 1953, General Motors, obviously a little bit before that, wanted to do a car as their anniversary car.
Okay.
They were founded in '03, so 50 years hence would be 53. So in 1951 or 2, they started planning to build this anniversary car, and it was named the Skylark. It was to be made in limited numbers. They made only 1,600 of them, in part because they were so difficult to build. A lot of hand-built aspects. The doors and the quarters had to be made by hand. They started out with a '53 Roadmaster coupe, and then they started cutting it up and turning it into a convertible coupe.
Okay.
And because of the incredible expense of building them, they had an attendant cost which was extremely high at the time, probably about the same as a Cadillac Eldorado, which would stop anybody's heart at that point. So
right.
Obviously, because they were so expensive, they had a very limited production, and General Motors really was never intending to do anything in terms of making money. It really was just to celebrate the fact they'd been in business for half a century, and they wanted to build something that was in honor of that. And they also built the Fiesta for Olds, and Cadillac had the Eldorado. So there were 3 different General Motors products that were made specifically with their anniversary in mind. And this is the Buick version. And the guys at Buick, because if a lot of the management at Buick wound up going upstairs to General Motors, to the parent company, they had a lot of sway over decisions with respect to the company's activities with respect to custom cars and race cars and that sort of thing. And Buick was always getting the better stuff. And in fact, there was some resentment, especially in the Cadillac division, that Buick was able to get all of these designers and all of these specialty kinds of things happening. And Cadillac, of course, at that point was considered to be the flagship of General Motors, and it was getting second-rate stuff in the minds of Cadillac people, and really in reality it was true. So those guys came out of Buick, they went upstairs to General Motors, and when they had this decision to make who's going to get the good stuff, they obviously favored Buick because that's where they came from. And that's one of the reasons why Buicks tend to be a cut above any particular Cadillac in that era. Did not compare favorably with the Buick. And of course, Buick started out with an overhead valve engine, which is still in use to this day, and Cadillac was stuck with the old flathead that kind of hit its wall.
Well, let me take another look at this overhead valve V8.
Right. This is called the Nailhead because
that's
the Nailhead, the famous Nailhead, and it was used a lot in hot rods and racing and that sort of thing because it created a lot of power. It was a very versatile motor. This is the first iteration of it.
Okay.
And then it stuck around for a lot of years, and it got bigger and bigger cubic inches. Ultimately, I think they got somewhere around 400 horsepower out of one, which was a huge amount of horsepower at the time.
Wow.
And so it was a very successful engine. It was around a long time.
This
is the very first one.
I'm just noticing a few things. I'm a newbie at this, but obviously a giant air cleaner. Is this an oil bath air cleaner?
This particular one, I believe, is, yes.
And this looks like a power steering. Was that an option?
That's correct. It was actually stock with standard with the Skylark, and of course there were you had power steering, you had power brakes. A lot of this stuff was really revolutionary.
In 1953.
In 1953, that was a very new concept.
Yeah.
And it's one of the reasons that the Skylarks are so valuable today, is because they have updated types of equipment that came stock with the car without having to be changed.
Right. Looks like a 2-barrel carburetor, is that right?
It's a 4-barrel.
It's a 4-barrel.
And they had their own 4-barrel carburetor, and
wow.
most of the stuff is coded to the Roadmaster and Skylark. Roadmaster being a 4-barrel carburetor, and that's how you distinguish a Roadmaster motor. And they're actually coded on the blocks to be either a Roadmaster or a Skylark.
Really?
So if you're going to build a righteous one, you have to make sure
the matching numbers thing is a big deal.
It is a big deal if you're going to go and do a national show car.
Right. Okay. Very good. And I guess this front chrome looks like it's pretty solid, but just needs to be recoated.
This upper grill bar is extremely rare. This is a good one in the sense that the pitting is limited. If the pitting gets to be so deep, the expense of doing one becomes prohibitive. But this is a pretty good one. It still has pitting, but the letters are still distinct.
Okay.
And if you get it to a really good comb plater, these will come back distinct. They won't be ground off. And
I follow you.
And sometimes the pitting is so bad that has to happen.
Yeah. But I'm sure these are pretty unique. I mean, there's not a lot of those parts.
It's Roadmaster and Skylark
Roadmaster
only.
And Skylark. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
The only thing it's really missing is a radiator, and what we do now is we put a similar kind of a radiator in appearance. We don't really use the old radiators. They typically are a problem unless you completely remanufacture them.
Yeah. Okay.
Because the people want to actually drive these cars, so they're going to sit in traffic, and then they have to go 60, 70 miles an hour, and that's a different thing that was going on in 1953.
Right. Now, I notice under the seat, I can see through the seat right now.
Yes.
What in the world? Looks like a fan down there?
That's an under-seat heater.
Really?
Yep. So, if Mrs. McGillicuddy wasn't about to have heat blowing out of the dash, she wanted it just kind of floating up around the car. So
it's almost like a seat heater.
It is a seat heater. It very
That
much is a seat heater, yes. And you can see that the outlets are actually feeding the back as well as the front.
It blows forward and
it
back.
worked really well. It's very quiet and very effective. These were really very well-made cars.
So under the chassis, are they plumbed to the engine coolant?
No, this is an electric fan.
It's electric.
Right.
I'm not talking about the fan. I'm talking about where the heat source.
The heat source is yes. You're correct. There are lines running from the engine to back. So whenever the engine warms up, it provides hot water, which goes through a radiator, a small radiator, and then the fan blows the hot air under the seat and out into the rest of the car.
Interesting. I've never seen that before. Huh.
Well, Buick was a forward-thinking company. They were always ahead of the curve. Again, back to what we talked about earlier about their position in General Motors. They were also the one that did all the racing, official racing, and so they kind of had a leg up on the other divisions.
Interesting.
Yep.
Now, the how tough are these convertible top mechanisms? Are they pretty easy to work with or difficult?
Well, they're complicated, and there's a lot of work to tearing them down, and we actually take pictures and do diagrams of the various top bows and the bars and the castings. It's a very complicated thing. There's probably 75 pieces in a top.
Okay.
So it's a very complicated process to restore one.
Is it a powered top?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, they had power tops in Buicks going back to 41.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah,
okay,
they were. Again, Buick was always. They had the first automatic transmission in a production car.
Right.
1937.
Really?
Right. That's way ahead of everybody else. Sorry.
Wow. Yeah.
If you're not a Buick guy, well, why aren't you?
Wow.
So these are the quarter windows that are unique to the Roadmaster, and actually these are unique to Skylark. And you can see here where we've had to recreate this piece out of brass because the other one was not in good enough shape.
Okay.
So and you can see clearly see that there's a left hand and a right hand.
Yep. I see
So
that.
you can't just have one casting, you have to have two.
Yeah.
So this is a brass casting, and we talked about that a little earlier, about how it has to be made a little bit bigger in the Master, because when it's cast, it shrinks 6%. So we have to account for that when we're making the Master that goes in and gets cast.
Interesting.
And we actually had to come out with Reproduction side trim because a lot of the side trim was gone or unusable, so we started making that again. And that's stainless steel, and it has to be bent in a form. Then the pins have to be electro welded, and then you have to polish the whole thing. It's a lot of work.
Wow.
And I think there's a total of 13 pieces that have to be made.
Wow. This is quite a car. This is obviously a very solid car.
Yeah.
All the major pieces
Yeah, it was,
are here.
yes. Yeah, we try to get cars out of the Western United States if humanly possible, because they just fare better. Because, you know, all convertibles without a top sit out in the weather. They gain water, and the biggest enemy of rust in cars is the jute. It's called. It goes underneath the carpet, and that jute, it becomes a sponge, and it holds water against the metal in it, and of course ultimately it rots it through.
The floor.
Exactly. So
yeah.
Especially if you have an old car, get the jute out of it, and then it'll survive pretty well.
Gotcha.
But with that jute sitting there holding water, it's just causing it to rust.
And I can see electric window switches. This is from a door
Right.
panel.
Those are the door panels for the electric switches.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it had electric windows, it had electric top.
That power seat?
Electric seat.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, power seat.
Wow.
And not much fun to restore. They're a lot of work, but we've done a number of them now, and we're kind of getting the hang of it.
Yeah.
This also is Roadmaster.
Right.
So there never really was one that said Skylark. There was a Skylark medallion on either side, and then there's one on the steering wheel, and that steering wheel, I've got one inside if you want to show it.
I'd like to see that. Yeah.
Let me show you that right now.
Let's do it.
Interestingly, we have two 53 Skylark steering wheels, and there's a number of interesting things going on here. The one on your right is a stock wheel that's been recast by our company,
okay,
in a color that's a little bit more translucent than the factory did. So we were trying to kind of heighten the brilliance of it a little bit, and that is what a stock wheel would look like on a 53 Buick, not a Skylark.
So this is a Buick.
This would be a 53 Buick, and then over here we have a 53 Skylark.
Okay.
And you can see the difference between the two. This one has the name of the owner of the car actually etched into the center of the.
And that is how it came?
That's how it came from Buick.
Wow.
The man who ordered his name was imprinted on that, and forevermore that's his car. And that's the only time I've ever seen that done in any car ever.
Huh. One thing I was going to ask you, I notice at this angle, I see that the two middle spokes are not attached to the wheel. Is
That's
that
correct.
Part of the horn function? Is
That's
this a
correct.
horn ring?
That's the horn. That's the horn. Now, if you notice, this wheel, okay, has a dish to it. This is the only one on planet Earth that's built that way. And we had to make dies to bend the entire steering wheel.
When you say dish, that means the
center
of the wheel is pushed.
Exactly. The center is lower than the rim. If you look at this one, it's tangent with the rim. If you look at this one.
I see. At this angle, it's
and
easier to
that's
see.
because the owner and I decided that that's what he wanted to see. He did not want to see a flat steering wheel. He thought it was out of place, and he's right. This is
That's very interesting.
a custom 53 Skylark that's being built. It's probably going to be the best one on the planet, and built by Chuck DeHarris in California, who just does masterful work.
Very interesting.
So he commissioned us to build this custom steering wheel that has a dish to it, and he quotes his designer buddy who says, if something is obvious, it probably isn't a good design. So if you didn't know any better, you would think that Buick built that wheel.
Yeah.
And Buick clearly did not build that wheel. There's the only one on the planet, and that's kind of the way Chuck DeHarris likes to do his cars.
Yeah.
He's a good friend of Chip Foose, who's obviously a very talented designer fabricator.
Sure. Wow, that is really a cool detail.